What's going on, guys? This is Chandler Smith, and one of the bigger questions that I get asked is, hey, is it worth it to use a HELOC? And so in this video, I'm first off going to explain what a HELOC is. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons, and then I'm going to show you the situations I think you should use a HELOC and the situations you most definitely should not. So with all of that being said, let's jump into it. All right, guys, if you're new to the channel, I've been investing in real estate for the last 9 years. I currently own 162 units of residential real estate and over 160 storage units. That puts me just north of $25 million of real estate. So throughout purchasing all of these properties, I've had the opportunity to use a lot of different financing. As a matter of fact, I'm over $10 million in debt right now. So I have a lot of debt. And that's okay, because if you're using debt properly, it's a good thing. If you're not, it can be a very bad thing. And in this video, I'm gonna help you understand what a HELOC is, when you should use it, and when you most definitely should not. All that I ask you to do is remember to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the little bell so that I can help you build a huge passive income, which in order to do that, you're going to need to learn how to use debt properly. One of those things being a HELOC. And now that we've covered that, let's jump into it. The best definition I can give you of a HELOC is it is essentially like a credit card, except the amount you're able to borrow in your HELOC is based on how much equity they feel comfortable letting you borrow against your own home. So for example, let's say you bought a home for $100,000 and you've lived in it for a while and now it's worth $200,000. Now you've paid some of it down, you also had a down payment, but you got $100,000 of equity in this property. And you go into the bank and you say, hey, I want a HELOC. And they say, perfect, we'll give you a HELOC for $100,000 on this equity that you have in your property. Here's how it works. You only have to pay a little fee on the front end. You can use it whenever you want. You can put it back whenever you want. But whenever you have it, you're going to have to pay this interest rate. And just so you know, this interest rate isn't locked forever. It can change as the prime rate changes. And that is what a HELOC is. So a lot of people say, hey, I've got equity in my home. I need money to start investing in real estate or to pay off my car or to do something else. You can literally use the money for whatever you want. We're gonna talk about that because there are certain things you most definitely should not use the money for. But a HELOC gives you the ability to go and get this massive check from the bank because that's equity you have in your property. Now, they're probably gonna go and do an appraisal on your property or just do a very brief look at it to make sure you've got enough equity. And then they're going to give you this chunk that you can take out and they're gonna say, this is the interest rate now. But again, your interest rate is going to be the prime rate plus 1% or the prime rate plus 2%, whatever it is. So you negotiate the terms. With a HELOC, you're going to have the interest rate that is most likely going to be changing. I've never seen them lock this in for the long term. So you've got a changing interest rate. You also have a set term. A lot of times they'll say, hey, you've got access to this HELOC for 10 years, and then we're gonna reevaluate. Sometimes it's really short, sometimes it's longer, but there's a specific time where after that, you're gonna have to be reevaluated on whether you can continue to use that HELOC or you get a new HELOC or whatever option you choose. So, seems pretty simple, right? You go in, you say, hey, I want a HELOC, you pay, usually it's only a couple $100s to get access to this HELOC, and now you just pay interest on it for whatever money you borrowed, and it's an interest-only loan. So, you could keep it out for as long as you want. Let's say you borrow the $100,000 and you put it into something and then you're just paying the monthly interest. As long as you're good with that, that's a-okay. Just recognize that the interest rate could potentially go up. The other thing that's really cool about a HELOC is you can get a HELOC for $100,000, but you don't have to pay interest on it unless you've actually pulled money out of that HELOC. So you go in, you get approved for your HELOC, you got $100,000 that you can pull out whenever you want, but maybe you wait until you actually need it because you're going to be flipping a property or doing something else with that money. There's no point in pulling it out and paying interest every month because what's cool about a HELOC is you don't have to do that. You can just pull it out when you need it and you can put it right back in for when you need it. So I actually know a lot of people that will do like a HELOC arbitrage type deal. So they'll give hard money to people. They're paying 3% on their HELOC, but they're making 12%, and they pull it out and toss it over, make that money, and then they put it right back in. So they're getting this return on their HELOC by, lending it out for a higher interest rate. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to talk about all of the ways you should or should not use a HELOC. I first want to talk about the pros and cons, because if you understand the pros and cons, then you personally are going to know what you should or should not use it for, but then I'm also going to help you at the end of the video. A lot of times when people are considering a HELOC, the other alternative is completely refinancing their property. So I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of each of these. With a HELOC, the one major pro is you can get the HELOC, but like I said, you can pull it out, you can put it back in. You also have the huge advantage of it being very cheap money. Not necessarily your interest rate, because that's going to be prime +1. So odds are, if you refinance, your interest rate will actually be smaller than it will be on a HELOC. And you don't have the risk when refinancing, because you can get your rate locked for 30 years compared to this that is consistently changing. But the advantage is, if you don't need it, you could just leave it in there. So you don't have to take it out. It could just sit there forever, or you could take it out the second you're done with it, you can put it back in. It's very liquid so that you don't have to continue to pay the interest rate. Where if you go and refinance, you pull that money out, you've got $100,000 sitting in your bank that a lot of people don't realize it, but every month, even though you've refinanced, you're technically being charged interest on that money every single month, because now it's just part of your loan. Now it might be a slightly lower interest rate, but you can't say, oh, you know what, I don't need this $100,000 yet. Let's put it back into my refinance until I need it. No, it doesn't work that way. So with a refinance, you want to make sure that you've got a consistent place for that money, or you're losing money. Where with a HELOC, you can take it out when you need it, you can put it back when you need it. And the major expense I was talking about is a HELOC doesn't have a lot of upfront expenses, where when you refinance, it does. A lot of times you're paying 1.5% to 2% to refinance, and that's of the amount that you're financing. And so that can be pretty pricey, where for HELOC, it's pretty inexpensive to do what's required to be able to get access to that HELOC. For me personally, because my business has done very well, I haven't used a HELOC per se, because I haven't needed to back the money I borrow from the bank with a property. Now I do when I get loans on the properties, but I actually use a line of credit. They've just looked at my business and said, you know what, Chandler, we've given you a $250,000 line of credit. It's not backed by anything. You've just proven to us that you're a very good person to lend money to, and so you can use it. So that I have used, and it works the same way. The only difference is with a HELOC, if you choose to use the HELOC, then you're spending to do the HELOC when that might limit your ability to refinance, because if you refinance, you can't have the HELOC on the property. That's all going to have to be taken into consideration. So it's kind of one or the other when you're in your situation. If you have access to get a line of credit because your business has proven themselves, a line of credit's even better, because then you can leave the equity in your property for if you want to refinance later. So those are the big pros and cons to line of credit or home equity line of credit compared to refinancing your property. I truly think the biggest one is, it's going to cost less on the front end, and you've got the flexibility to put that money in or pull it out as you need it. The biggest disadvantage is the fact that your interest rates are changing, and that you don't have a long term, because 10 years from now, things could be completely different, but the rates are going to be changing even more consistently than that. A lot of times they're only based on a month to month, or every 6 months, or every year. And so that's something that can be very scary, because if you're borrowing money and you're borrowing it knowing that you need to use this HELOC for a 2 to 3 year period, a lot can happen in a 2 to 3 year period that will make the interest rates you're paying on that HELOC not worth whatever you ended up investing in. And that's why you need to be very careful that you're not taking money in a HELOC that might need to be locked up for the long term, that you can't replace with other money, because then if prime goes through the roof, your interest on that is going to go through the roof. And that is the biggest thing that you want to make sure you're careful about when using a HELOC. So now that you understand what it is, I'm going to explain some of the situations you should use it and some situations that you shouldn't. If someone comes to me and says, Chandler, I need a HELOC so that I can buy a property cash, and then I'm going to refinance. They've told me I can refinance in 3 months or 6 months or a year. Well, look at your risk versus reward. Is this a property that's an extremely good deal that you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else? Yeah, well, you probably want to use your HELOC to get it, but make sure that you can pull off the refinance. Because if you've taken this equity out of your home, you've put it in, interest rates start to go up, and it's locked up in this other property, you want to have the ability to refinance so that you can lock in the rates. And preferably, you want to keep it as short as possible, because if you're willing to do a HELOC, odds are your interest rate works there, which means it should work to be able to get a loan on the property. But if you have a HELOC locked up in the property and then you get to the point where you wait so long that even refinancing it, your numbers don't work, that's also something you've got to worry about. So make sure that you know your timeline. Anytime you're borrowing money at an interest rate where the interest rate can change, or even where it can't, you want to know exactly how long it's going to take you before you can pay that off. Now for me, when I've got 30-year fixed mortgages, I don't care if I take the full 30 years because the property's going up in value, the cash flow is going up, all of those things are good. And I know that my expenses aren't changing because my interest is going up, where with a HELOC, your interest could potentially go up. So make sure you've got a time frame pegged. A good example of where not to use a HELOC. If you're pulling out a HELOC to buy an investment property and you don't know how you're going to be able to pay that back, but hey, I can get $100,000 to put as a down payment on a $400,000 property, that's a little sketchy because yeah, your property might be cash flowing well now, but if interest rates go up and you can't replace that HELOC, now you've purchased a property that is completely bought with interest. So you've got your fixed rate, which is good for the 75%, but if you used your HELOC for the 25% and you get 2-3 years into it and you're thinking, crap, interest rates have gone up 2-3%, now I'm not cash flowing on this property, now I'm even having to pay out of pocket, that could be a stressful situation for you. And so for me, again, find a place that is short-term for your HELOC, something that you know for sure within the next 6 months to a year at the most, in my opinion, you're going to be able to pay back and pull that out. Now, it doesn't mean you need to pay it off. Maybe a year goes by, interest rates haven't changed, you want to leave your HELOC in there, you want to use your money in other places. As long as you always have a short-term exit strategy with your HELOC so you don't end up in a place where you're toast. A situation where I wouldn't use a HELOC but I would go towards a refinance is if someone comes to me and says, Chandler, I've got $100,000 equity in my property. That's enough to buy this other rental property. What would you do? I don't know that I'm going to have another $100,000 coming in to replace that. I'd say, well, look, if you're planning on staying in your home for a while and those numbers work good, then refinance your property. You're going to get a lower interest rate. You're going to be able to pull that money out, put it in as a down payment, and then get a good interest rate on the rest of it with buying the rental property. That makes more sense. But if someone comes and says, hey, you know, I'm going to do a flip, it's going to take 6 months, or I'm going to be able to refinance in 6 months, or I'm going to be able to do one of these things that's short term, that's where I would say the HELOC is the right pick for you. All right, guys, that's all I've got to say about a HELOC. I know that's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It should be. It's a great tool if used properly. It can burn you hard if you don't use it properly. So best of luck going and pulling out a HELOC or refinancing on your home, or saying, you know what, maybe I'm going to hold off because I don't really have a place for either of them. One thing I would say, there's nothing wrong if you don't know what your strategy is with going in and getting approved for a HELOC so that you've got access to it, especially if it costs you $300-400 to have access to $100,000. If you need it as reserve funds, that's a great use as well. That's one thing I've used my line of credit for, is I haven't really needed to use it, but I've got $250,000 that I know I can get at prime plus one that is just sitting there. It cost me $400 to get that line of credit on the front end. I have access to it for the next 5 years. That seems like a very smart thing for me, because if I do get in a pickle, I'll tell you this, a HELOC or a line of credit is a heck of a lot better than using money on your credit card and paying 24% interest every month, because prime plus one, I guarantee, is always going to be substantially less than a credit card. So it's a great option for you as an alternative to continuing to put money on your credit card. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, remember to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the little bell. If you're interested in learning how to start investing in real estate, go check out the other videos on my channel. And if you're really interested and you want to jump in with both feet, go grab my real estate investing course down in the description. Now, if you guys enjoyed it, again, hit the like button. We'll look forward to seeing you guys in the future videos. I said guys a lot. Thanks, guys.